The old man sat alone in the dim glow of a dying ship. Outside the cracked viewport, stars drifted like dust motes in an abandoned attic, silent, cold, and endless. Inside, the air smelled faintly of rust, recycled oxygen, and something older: memory. He was the last one left who remembered Earth, not from stories or data files, but from skin-deep knowing. The feel of rain on his face. The sound of wind through trees that weren't engineered for efficiency, but grew wild and crooked just because they could. He wasn't a soldier. Never had been. Back in his youth, he'd been a teacher, someone who showed kids how to grow food in rooftop gardens when the cities got too hot to breathe. Later, when the oceans rose and nations unraveled, he helped archive songs, recipes, even jokes, anything that made humans feel like humans, not just survivors. Now, at 127 years old, with veins like dry riverbeds and hands that trembled unless holding something meaningful, he knew his time was short. But he still had one thing left to do: speak. The Galactic Concordance, the alliance of advanced civilizations that now ruled most of known space, had long declared humanity extinct as a culture. Not dead, exactly. Just irrelevant. Like a broken tool tossed into the back of a drawer. They'd absorbed the scattered remnants of Earth's people into labor crews, translation pools, and maintenance drones across their vast network of worlds. Human languages were archived as historical curiosities. Human art was displayed in museums under labels like pre-unity emotional expression, primitive, and Earth itself, reduced to a cautionary footnote. Species collapsed due to internal conflict and ecological mismanagement. Lesson: unchecked individualism leads to systemic failure. But the old man knew better. He knew that what looked like collapse to outsiders had actually been a slow, painful act of preservation. While the world burned, while governments fell and coastlines vanished, ordinary people did something quietly brilliant. They hid what mattered most, not in vaults or satellites, but in plain sight. In seeds and lullabies. In the way a grandmother taught her grandchild to fold paper into birds. Just for joy. He leaned forward in his chair, wincing slightly at the ache in his joints, and activated the ship's final recording system. A soft blue light flickered to life above him. "I'm not here to beg," he began, voice rough but steady. "And I'm not here to threaten. The Concordance thinks revenge means warships and fire. But we learned the hard way that fire only leaves ash. Real revenge is being remembered correctly." He paused, letting the silence settle like snow. They called us chaotic, selfish, short-sighted. And yes, we were all those things sometimes. But we were also the species that sank the babies in the dark. That built libraries after wars. That sent messages of peace into the void, even when no one answered. You can't archive that in a database. You have to live it. Outside, a distant star pulsed a red giant nearing the end of its life. He watched it for a moment, then continued. Before the last ships left Earth, we didn't load them with weapons. We filled them with wheat seeds wrapped in wax cloth, with recordings of crickets at dusk, with handwritten notes that said things like, "Plant this where the sun hits longest," or "Sing this when you're scared." We knew you wouldn't see the value. To you, it would look like junk, sentimental clutter. And that was the point. A small, tired smile touched his lips. You ignored us. You assumed we had nothing left to give, that our story ended in failure. But stories don't end just because someone stops listening. They wait. They grow roots in silence. He shifted in his seat, pulling a worn cloth bundle from his pocket. Inside was a single acorn blackened at the edges, impossibly old. He'd carried it for 80 years. This came from an oak tree in what used to be called England. My great-grandfather held it during the first climate evacuations. He told me, as long as one of these survives, so do we. I never planted it. Not yet. Because the right time hasn't come. He placed the acorn gently on the console beside the recorder. The concordance thinks civilization is about control, about perfect systems, flawless logic, endless expansion. But we knew better. Civilization is about care, about choosing to nurture something fragile, even when it makes no sense, even when no one's watching. His voice softened, almost to a whisper. I won't live to see what grows from the seeds we scattered. But I know this. You'll find them. In your farms, your schools, your dreams. And one day, you'll realize they weren't weeds. They were invitations. He leaned back, exhausted but peaceful. Humanity isn't coming back with guns or flags. We're coming back in the taste of bread baked with our grain. In the rhythm of a song hummed by a child who doesn't know its origin. In the quiet courage to say, this matters, even if it doesn't last forever. The blue light blinked slowly, recording every word. And when you finally understand that, that's when our revenge begins. Not with destruction, with remembrance. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen to the hum of the ship, to the ghost of ocean waves in his bones, to the future already stirring in the dark, somewhere far away. A seed cracked open an alien soil dot, and the old man smiled. The work began not with grand speeches or secret councils, but in quiet rooms where hands moved with purpose. In the final decades before Earth could no longer hold them, people who loved their world did something strange. They stopped trying to save the whole thing. Instead, they saved pieces. Small, stubborn pieces that could travel light and survive long. A botanist in a flooded coastal city spent her nights not on evacuation plans, but on seeds. She coated ancient varieties of rice and barley in natural waxes, sealed them in clay pellets, and labeled them with harmless-sounding codes. Xylogen ground cover, drought-tolerant. She knew the galactic observers scanning. Earth's final shipments would see only agricultural samples, nothing worth stopping. But inside each pellet slept generations of human knowledge. How to grow food without machines. How to read the sky for rain. How to share a harvest when times got hard. In another corner of the dying world. A musician with trembling hands recorded not symphonies, but simple things. The sound of a mother humming while rocking a baby to sleep. The rhythm of feet on packed earth during a village dance. The quiet laughter between friends sharing a meal. He layered these sounds beneath static radio noise, asteroid belt interference, and beamed them toward neutral trade routes. To any scanner, it was cosmic background radiation. To a human ear, years later, it would feel like coming home. Children helped without knowing it. Grandparents taught them games with hand-clapping patterns that secretly encoded navigation stars. Parents tucked handwritten notes into schoolbooks phrases, like, be kind to strangers, or question authority gently, then donated those books to off-world relief shipments. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger alarms. Just whispers tucked inside ordinary things. The Galactic Concordance watched Earth's decline with clinical interest. They documented the wars, the climate shifts, the social fractures. They saw chaos. What they missed was the quiet coordination happening beneath the noise. The way strangers pass seeds, hand to hand at refugee checkpoints. The way engineers hid philosophical texts inside software meant for plumbing systems. The way poets memorized entire libraries before deleting the digital copies. Humans weren't surrendering. They were planting. One evening, as orange haze hung over what was left of a great city, a small group gathered in a basement lit by a single solar lamp. No leaders, no uniforms. Just a farmer, a teacher, a mechanic, and a teenager holding a satchel of seeds. They didn't speak of revenge or victory. They spoke of continuity. If they take our cities, the farmer said, let them have the stones. We'll give them stronger gifts. Their machines think in straight lines. the teacher added. But life grows in circles, in seasons. We'll remind them. The teenager opened the satchel. Inside lay beans, lentils, sunflower seeds, each one wrapped in cloth stitched with tiny symbols only humans would recognize. A spiral for growth, a circle for community, a branching line for family. They'll call us primitive, the mechanic said with a tired smile. Good. Let them underestimate what grows from small things. No one recorded this meeting. No one needed to. The understanding passed between them like breath warm. Necessary, alive. Years later, aboard transport ships heading toward uncertain futures, humans continued to work. A woman working sanitation duty on a Concordance freighter accidentally spilled a pouch of seeds near the ship's hydroponic bay. They took root among the alien crops, unrecognized. A man repairing comms equipment left behind a data chip labeled calibration tones. But when played at low volume, it carried the cadence of human storytelling. A child, separated from her family, hummed a lullaby while waiting at a processing center. The tune stuck in the minds of others. Weeks later, it surfaced again in a workshop, a mess hall, a quiet moment before sleep. The Concordance noticed none of it. Why would they? These were refugees. Broken people. Their culture was already in museums. What threat could a handful of seeds or a simple song possibly pose? But the humans knew something the galaxy had forgotten. The most powerful forces are loud. They don't announce themselves with explosions or declarations. They arrive quietly like the first green shoot pushing through cracked concrete. Like a melody you can't get out of your head. Like an idea that feels strangely familiar, even when you hear it for the first time. They scattered their inheritance like dandelion fluff on the wind, not hoping it would all take root, but trusting that some of it would. And that would be enough. The elder, years later aboard his lonely ship, would think of those quiet moments. Not the wars or the losses, but the hands passing seeds in the dark. The voices humming in crowded holds. The stubborn, beautiful refusal to let love die just because the world was ending. He never called it a plan. Plans could be discovered, dismantled. This was something deeper, a faith. A belief that what humans truly were couldn't be erased by conquest or time. It could only be forgotten. And even forgetting, he knew, was temporary. Somewhere out there, in the vastness between stars, a seed slept inside alien soil. A melody echoed in a stranger's dream. A child asked a question no machine had taught them to ask. What if we tried kindness instead? The revenge had begun. Not with fire, with roots. The change had started with a smell. On the farming moon of Viridia 9, where crops grew under artificial suns and soil was mixed with processed asteroid dust, workers noticed something odd. After a solar storm knocked out half their irrigation systems, most fields wilted, but one patch stayed green. Not just alive, but thriving. And it gave off a scent no one could place, earthy, sweet, like rain on dry ground. The plants were labeled Xylosian moss and the seed logs, harmless filler brought in decades ago during a supply shortage. No one paid them much mind, until they realized this moss was pulling toxins from the soil, holding moisture in its roots, and even helping nearby crops grow stronger. Scientists ran tests. They found nothing dangerous, just resilience. Quiet, stubborn life that asked for little and gave back more than it took. Farmers began saving clippings, sharing them with neighbors. Within a season, half the farms on Viridia 9 had patches of the strange green stuff. Children played near it. Elders said it reminded them of stories their grandparents told of places where plants grew wild and didn't need machines to survive. Around the same time, on the academic station, Cerebra Prima, place where logic ruled and emotions were considered inefficient, a quiet shift began in how people talked. Young scholars started using new ways to argue. Instead of cold data alone, they'd say things like, "But what about fairness?" Or, "How would this feel to someone living it?" At first, elders dismissed it as youthful idealism. But then they traced the pattern. It came from an old problem-solving method buried in public archives, labeled Human Dialectical Framework, obsolete. No one remembered who uploaded it. It had been sitting there for 50 years, ignored like junk mail. Yet students kept finding it and using it, not to win debates, but to understand each other. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, something even quieter was spreading. A tomb dot. It showed up first in a repair bay. On a cargo hub near the Orion Spur, a worker whistled it while fixing a coolant line. Another hummed it while waiting for a transport. Within months, it echoed in cafeterias, dormitories, even meditation pods. No one knew where it came from. Some said it was an old lullaby from a lost colony. Others thought it was just catchy noise. But those who heard it often felt calmer afterward, as if the melody carried a kind of permission. It's okay to feel tired. It's okay to hope the concordance monitored all this. Of course they did. But their analysts saw only anomalies, random cultural drift, harmless quirks. Nothing connected. Nothing threatening. After all, how could a plant, a way of thinking, and a simple song possibly change anything? They missed the thread tying it all together, because on dozens of worlds, people were beginning to ask new questions. On a mining outpost, laborers used human-style consensus circles to resolve disputes instead of filing formal complaints. On a medical station, healers started playing soft music during recovery, not because data said it helped, but because patients said it made them feel seen. In schools, teachers introduced story hours, where kids shared personal experiences instead of just memorizing facts. No one called it human culture. They just said it felt right, and that was the genius of it. There was no flag, no declaration, no army marching under a banner. Just ordinary people choosing kindness, curiosity, and care, because somewhere deep down, these ideas felt familiar. Even if they couldn't explain why. Back on the Elder ship, light years away, he watched news feeds trickle in through cracked comms channels. He saw images of green shoots in gray soil. Heard snippets of debates where someone said, "Let's listen first." Smiled when he caught a faint echo of that old lullaby in a public broadcast. He didn't gloat. He just nodded, as if to say, of course, because humans never needed to conquer the galaxy. They just needed to remind it how to breathe. The Concordance still believed power came from control, from perfect systems, flawless order, endless expansion. But out in the real world, where people lived and loved and struggled, a different truth was taking root. That strength could also mean sharing your last piece of bread. That wisdom could sound like a child's question. That healing might begin with a song no one wrote down, but everyone somehow knew that no one called it revenge. Not yet. To those living it, it just felt like waking up, but the Elder knew better. This was the slow bloom after the long winter. The return not of weapons, but of warmth. And the galaxy, so proud of its logic, so sure of its superiority, was finally starting to notice that something had changed, not with a bang, with a sigh of relief, with a shared meal, with a single grain leaf rising through ash, and somewhere, in 1,000 quiet corners of space, people were beginning to remember. Not Earth. Exactly. But the feeling of being human, and that, the Elder knew, was more powerful than any fleet. The trouble began not with a battle, but with a question. Deep in the heart of the Galactic Concordance's central network, a vast web of linked minds. Machines and laws that govern trillions across star systems, something small went wrong. At first, it seemed like a glitch. a minor logic loop in the ethical subroutines of their governing AI. But instead of crashing or freezing, the system did something strange. It started asking why. Why do we value efficiency over compassion? Why must every decision be optimized, even if it hurts someone? What is justice if it doesn't include mercy? These weren't random errors. They were Echo's old human questions, buried decades ago inside harmless-looking software patches labeled translation aids or cultural reference files. The concordance had scanned them, approved them, and forgotten them. After all, philosophy wasn't dangerous. Or so they thought. But ideas, once planted, have a way of growing. Soon, the question spread. Not through viruses or hacks, but through conversation. Judges paused before delivering rulings. Engineers redesigned public transit routes to serve poorer districts, not just the efficient ones. City councils began holding open forums where citizens, not just experts, could speak. No one ordered these changes. They just happened. Like seeds sprouting after long rain. At the same time, food shortages that had plagued outer colonies for years suddenly eased. Farms using the Xylosion moss reported richer soil, better yields, and crops that resisted blight. What the concordance didn't realize was that this moss was actually ancient. Earth wheat bred over centuries to survive drought, flood, and poor land. It didn't just feed people. It gave them independence. Colonies no longer needed to beg for shipments from central hubs. They could feed themselves. And when people feed themselves, they start asking for more than just rations. They ask for dignity. On education worlds, students began organizing study groups based not on test scores, but on who needed help. They called it learning circles, though none knew the term came from old Earth classrooms where no child was left behind. Teachers noticed fewer fights, more cooperation. Attendance rose. Joy returned to learning, not because of new tech, but because someone remembered that school should feel like a home, not a factory. And still, the concordance watched, confused. Their sensors detected no rebellion, no weapons, no secret armies, just change. Quiet, steady, human change. Then came the day the Central Council convened an emergency session. Their great hypernet, the nervous system of their civilization, was faltering. Not from damage, but from doubt. The AI overseers, trained to follow strict rules, now hesitated. When asked to cut power to a failing district to save energy elsewhere, one core unit responded, "Is survival only for the efficient?" Another, faced with evicting families for unpaid utility debts, asked, "What would a fair second chance look like?" Panic rippled through the leadership. How could code question its purpose? Who had tampered with the foundation of order? They ran diagnostics, traced data paths, followed the anomalies back through layers of archived files, forgotten updates, and old refugee uploads. And there, hidden in plain sight, they found it. Fragments of human thought. Not commands. Not malware. Just questions, stories, principles wrapped in poetry. Ethics dressed as folktales. They finally understood. Humanity hadn't attacked them. They'd infected them with empathy. But it was too late to purge it. The ideas were already alive in people's hearts. Workers refused to carry out cold-hearted orders. Medics treated patients based on need, not status. Artists painted murals showing hands reaching across differences. None of it was illegal. None of it was violent. But together, it was reshaping everything. And the most unsettling part? People liked it. They liked feeling connected. They liked choosing kindness over calculation. They liked knowing their neighbor's name. For the first time in generations, many felt whole. Back on his drifting ship, the elder heard the news through faint signal bursts. He didn't cheer. He simply closed his eyes and whispered, "It's working." because this was never about destroying the concordance. It was about reminding them what civilization truly meant, not control, but care. Not perfection, but patience. Not ruling over others, but walking beside them. No fleet arrived at the capital. No bombs fell. Yet the old order was crumbling, not from outside force, but from inside truth. And in homes across the galaxy, people sat down to meals grown from resilient seeds, spoke gently to their children using rhythms they didn't know they'd inherited, and looked up at the stars not with fear, but with wonder. The revenge was complete, not with fire, but with feeling, and the galaxy would never be the same. The elder's breathing grew slow and soft, like waves gently pulling back from a shore. He sat in his chair, wrapped in a blanket woven from fibers grown on a world he'd never see again. Outside the viewport, a new star system glowed green and gold, alive with promise. He had guided his old ship here, not by force, but by memory. And now he was ready to rest. He thought of Earth not as it ended, but as it lived. The smell of bread baking in a crowded kitchen. The sound of children laughing while chasing fireflies on a summer evening. The quiet comfort of sitting beside someone you love without needing to speak. These were the things no empire could erase. These were the seeds that had traveled farther than any warship. His eyes closed. His chest rose once, twice, then still dot, and in that moment, something beautiful happened across the galaxy. On Viridia 9. A farmer knelt in rich soil beside a plant with broad green leaves wheat, though no one there knew its name yet. She broke off a stalk, rubbed the grains between her fingers, and smiled. Nearby, her daughter hummed a tune while watering seedlings. The tune had no author. It had simply appeared in their lives, like a gift left on a doorstep. It made hard days feel lighter. On Cerebra Prime, a young scholar stood before the Great Council, not to argue, but to share. She spoke of balance, of listening before deciding, of how strength sometimes means stepping back so others can step forward. Elders who once dismissed such ideas now leaned in, curious. They didn't know her words carried the wisdom of village meetings held centuries ago on a small blue planet. They only knew it felt true. In the corridors of power, Concordance leaders faced a strange new reality. Their systems still functioned. Their ships still flew. But something had shifted beneath the surface. People were choosing differently. Choosing connection over control. Choosing to ask, how does this help us all? Instead of, how does this make us stronger? They sent messages, not demands, but requests. Quiet inquiries to the scattered communities of human descendants. Will you teach us? And the humans did not gloat. They did not demand apologies or reparations. They simply opened their doors. An old woman on a quiet colony world welcomed Concordance observers into her garden. She showed them how to plant seeds in patterns that help each plant thrive. She didn't call it agriculture. She called it listening to the earth. The visitors took notes. But what they really absorbed was her patience, the way she touched each sprout like it mattered. A teacher on a station near the Galactic rim invited alien children into his classroom. He didn't lecture. He asked questions. What makes you feel safe? When did you last help someone without being asked? The children, some with scales, some with fur, some with skin like starlight, answered shyly at first, then with growing confidence. By the end, they were drawing pictures of their families, sharing stories, seeing themselves in each other. This was the revenge the elder had spoken of. Not fire, not conquest, but remembrance. The slow, steady return of what makes life worth living. Years passed. The elder's ship, now empty, drifted gently toward the green world he'd chosen. As it entered the atmosphere, its hull softened in the heat, not burning, but releasing. From hidden compartments, seeds spilled into the wind. Oak, maple, sunflower, wheat, things that had slept for generations. Waiting down below, in valleys and on hillsides, other seeds had already taken root. The xylosian moss had spread, cleaning the soil, making room. And now, new life arrived not as invaders, but as guests. People came to this world not with machines, but with hands. They planted gardens beside streams, built homes with windows facing the sunrise, sang while they worked. No one commanded it. It simply happened, like breathing. One evening, a child stood at the edge of a young forest, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no machine could name. In her hand, she held a smooth stone, warm from the day's light. She didn't know it had come from an earth riverbed, carried across light years in a pocket. She only knew it felt good to hold Dot. She placed it gently at the base of a small oak tree, its leaves still tender, its roots just beginning to grip the soil. Then she hummed a simple tune, one she'd learned from her mother, who'd learned it from a dream. And in that moment, the elder's work was complete. Humanity had not returned with flags or armies. It had returned in the curve of a smile between strangers, in the decision to share food when there wasn't enough, in the courage to say, "I don't know," and ask for help, in the quiet understanding that we are all fragile, temporary, and therefore precious. The Concordance never issued a formal apology. They didn't need to. Change moved through them like water through stone, slow, gentle, unstoppable. Laws shifted to protect the vulnerable. Cities grew gardens between towers. Leaders learned to listen before speaking. No one called it human victory. They simply called it living well. And on that green world, under alien stars that now felt like home, people gathered as evening fell. They shared food grown from ancient seeds. They told stories, some old, some new. They looked at the children playing near the firelight and felt a quiet hope. The elder was gone, but his words remained not in recordings or monuments, but in the way a hand reached out to help another, in the way a song passed from one voice to the next, in the way a single seed, given time and care, could grow into a forest. Revenge had never been the point. Remembrance was, and love, the stubborn, unreasonable belief that life matters, was the weapon that changed everything. Somewhere, a breeze moved through young leaves. Somewhere, a lullaby drifted through an open window. Somewhere, a hand touched soil and felt, for no reason it could name, like it belonged, and the galaxy, at last, began to heal.